I recently got into a fist fight with my brother causing me to miss my bus, only to find out the bus had been in a horrible accident with 2 fatalities. How has a few seconds changed your life? My dad had a customer in New York that he worked for. You could never make this man mad, ever. He would just shrug and say, "Well, we'll just have to work through this," and smile and get to work. One day dad finally asked him, "John, you are the most easygoing person I've ever seen. Why is that?" And he answered, "Dave, I was angry one day. I woke up late and rushed to get ready, and right as I got to the subway, the train pulled away right as I got to the station. There I sat cursing, having to wait for the next train. Already late to work and having a bad day, I walked into the ground floor of my office building, and that's when the elevator exploded as a terrorist flew a plane into it. My office was on the floor it hit. Since then, I'm on borrowed time. Goosebumps, dude." Felt really weird before I was about to take a car ride from home to school. Took a breather and drank a glass of water and felt better. Missed being in a 5-car accident caused by a coked up maniac by a few seconds. My god. Pay heed to this comment, everyone. Coca-Cola addiction isn't a joke. A boat I was on sunk off NJ into the near freezing Atlantic. When the Coast Guard arrived by helicopter, my friend was dead and I was unconscious. At the hospital it was determined my core body temp was 86F. If you google that, it says fatal. A few more minutes in those bitter seas and I wouldn't be typing this now. Long story, but I like my long stories, so head on to the TLDR. If you're unlike me, back in 2007, my life was pretty much on an upswing. My dad got me a job in the hotel he worked in, took a graveyard shift, and was saving money to live off campus for my sophomore year, as well as living with some popular guys who brought me into their social circle. One night, my co-workers, older folk, joked about not wanting to see photos of those crazy house parties you college kids do. I noticed that I lacked a lot of photos of myself, so on my way home via the empty train I would try to get artsy with my cell phone's photo timer. On my drive home from the train station after midnight, I decided on an idea for some cool Facebook photos. Our house had a driveway and street parking along a long roadway, so what about a photo of me on a long street in my neat suit? Rad. I parked my car in front of my dad's van on the street parking so no one would see me if they were driving past. There were few cars, maybe one every 20 minutes, so I should be fine, I told myself. I positioned the camera phone on the wipers of the car and stood on the street, grainy and dark. A terrible photo. A car approaches. I wait, let it pass. Another photo taken, just as bad. I turned on my car's headlights and retook another photo. Eerily illuminated. That'll do. Maybe another one? I decided against another one. I'm not trying to be vain here. I turned off the lights of the car and walked up the driveway, which maybe took less than a minute. Walk into the house, shut the door and smash, boom. The sound was so sudden, I thought it was the bass of a stereo in the basement. Maybe someone was up this late watching a movie. I turn around and face the door, looking to see. No car. Where's my car? Even more, where's my dad's car? Something catches my eye to the right. My dad's car is flipped on our front yard. A random car is on its side leaning against my car, which is shoved right over where I had been posing. To this day, my parents refuse to have anyone in our family to park on the street parking. TLDR. If I stayed a minute longer taking photos of myself, I'd be dead. My self-esteem shut down that little photo shoot just in time. I was returning from my grandfather's funeral a couple years ago and I was on the highway when a sudden downpour forced me to pull over because I couldn't see and I was hydroplaning. I pulled over to the shoulder of the freeway and put my car in park and lit up a cigarette to wait out the worst of it. For no reason that I can fathom, I suddenly had an odd feeling that I should pull my car ahead further, so I put it back in drive and pulled ahead about 20 yards and put it back in park. Mind you, this was the middle of the afternoon and I was on a long, Very straight stretch of the freeway, so really any place to pull over was just as good as any other. Not 2 minutes after I pulled ahead, I looked in my rear view mirror and I saw alternating headlights and taillights headed right in my direction at a very high rate of speed. 2 women had lost control and their car was doing 360s as it went off the road just feet behind where I was sitting. There was an open field next to us, so they just skidded to a stop and everyone was fine. But if I hadn't pulled forward, they would have surely collided with me and things would have turned out much differently. I chalk that one up to grandpa saving my butt. Don't mention it, kid. Now get the frick off my lawn. This girl I met at summer camp a while back told me this story about her brother. So her brother is studying really hard one night for a big test for his afternoon class the next day. He ends up not going to sleep until around 4 AM. But his alarm wakes him up the next day for his morning class in Norris Hall. He thinks, oh, I'm too tired to go to class, I can just skip this one. The date was the 16th of April, 2007. Virginia Tech. I was up late studying that night and slept in late. Let's be honest, I always missed this class. I woke up to 5 missed calls, 10 texts, and I couldn't call out. I had no clue until I turned the TV on. My class was in Norris at 9 AM. I would have been walking to class towards the tail end of that whole ordeal. Some idiot in class was throwing this really sharp pen across the room, returning it to me since I lent it to him. He threw it like a javelin. I didn't notice that he was crudely returning it to me, but I was drinking water during the incident. The angle that I was holding my water bottle up, as well as the gesture my fingers made in gripping it, helped the pen land right in between my ring and middle finger, and no further. It was centimeters away from my right eye. I'd hate to think what could have happened. That is scary to think about. I feel that losing your vision like that is super scary, as all of a sudden, there's something sticking out of your eye and you can't see it. As a kid, my sister and I would fight a lot. We are both girls and close in age, so we would often end up in lame girl fights. When I was in grade 3, my sister and me were waiting for my mom to pick us up from school on a curb. My sister was jerking me around by the back of my book bag, and as she pulled me toward her, a car suddenly came up on the curb at high speed. It would have nailed me had she not jerked me around. Being young, I remember not totally processing this, and instead I just opted to pull her hair. Sisters are the best. I was with my ex driving home late one night, and we were having a huge argument in the car. I stopped at a light, proceeded to yell at him. The light turned green, but I was in the middle of making my point, so I didn't immediately get going. Right as I was stepping on the gas, a drunk driver came from the other side, going about 90 miles per hour in insane zigzag, passing about 16 feet in front of my car. We both froze and looked at each other with the holy frick, this is the luckiest argument we've ever had look. When I was 4 years old, there were 2 men wanted for murder on the loose in the area. On the news they had been described as survival experts. One day mom said she got a strange feeling like something bad was about to happen, so she took me and my sister to the park. When we got back, our house had been broken into and all that was gone was a little cash and all of our camping gear. My mom gets these feelings all the time. When I was 7 or 8, she stopped me on my way out one day and told me, out of nowhere, not to sit at the back of the school bus because it wasn't safe. Of course, the bus got in an accident that day, and several of my classmates were hospitalized. Indirectly, as it is about my mom and her dad. When my mother was a baby, her crib was in her parents' room. For reasons unknown, my grandfather got up in the middle of the night and moved the crib. Maybe an hour later, we're not sure because they fell asleep. The ceiling over where the crib was before caved in. I'm talking plaster and wood beams. She wouldn't have survived, and yours truly would have never been born. I have 2. One about me and one about my father. Mine's less climactic, so high school English tells me I should do that one first. Just got my license. Was sitting at a stoplight that was completely blind. Buildings on either side. No right on red because no one could see. Was skipping a song and didn't notice the light had turned green. When I looked up and saw I started to pull forward as an SUV comes barreling down at like 60 perpendicular to me and scraps my front end. If I had not been a music bee and just dealt with the song, I would have either been boned or in the side of the building. My dad used to work at One Liberty, which was right next to WTC. There was this awesome way the buildings connected like 30 stories up that my father always took to get to his building by going through WTC instead of just taking the front door. Anyway, one morning I adamantly demanded my father make me chocolate chip pancakes and refused to let him leave until he did. He was late to work. Guess the date. So you got pancakes and he owes you one. Several weekends ago on a mildly busy Northern Virginia highway, I chose to stay in the middle lane for a little longer than usual before my exit. A few seconds after choosing to not change lanes, the right lane came to a sudden halt due to a stalled car ahead. A big pickup truck hauling a heavy trailer slammed into the car that would have been in front of me. Would have been me. And it literally exploded. Debris and glass shooting in all directions as the truck slammed into it. I was so stunned that I didn't react to what was happening literally right next to me. The collision caused a chain reaction where an SUV in that lane ramped up onto a smaller car and literally rolled over into the lane I was in at the time right behind me. Had I braked or otherwise slowed because of what I was seeing next to me, that SUV would have rolled over in front of, or onto, me while I was traveling at 60 miles per hour. I passed by totally unscathed, seconds from two different terrible collisions. Long time ago, my 9-year-old son woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I was a single mother of 4 kids, 13 to 1 in age. As my son walked to the bathroom, he had a view into my 13-year-old daughter's room. There was a naked man with a scarf across his face kneeling by her bed. My son got so scared he started to run to my room to wake me, but before he could, the naked guy walked behind him, patted him on the shoulder, and went right back out the slider he had broken into. We called the police and they got there in what felt like a minute. Through the interviews and a review of what my son viewed, they told me that I had just missed having everyone murdered by a serial killer. They said he was doing a ritual next to my daughter's bed and that my son had interrupted him. They believed that he would never finish the murders if he had not done his ritual. They did think he might come back. My home was watched for weeks. I was never alone in that house if I could help it and moved soon after. So if my son had not gotten up to pee, my children and myself would all be dead. Still afraid to sleep over 20 years later. I was a few seconds away from buying a plane ticket for flight 3407 from Newark to Buffalo. Luckily a friend came into my room and convinced me to stay home that weekend. Checked online later that night and saw the plane had crashed and there were no survivors. Guess I got lucky this time. Yeah, it could have been worse. You could have actually ended up in Buffalo. My apologies. This is long and I'm typing on my phone. Towards the end of college, I went on a date with a girl who wanted to go to a club in town. I never wanted to go to this club, but since she really wanted to go, I begrudgingly agreed. When we arrived, I went to get her a drink. While at the bar, this little number walks right up to me and starts asking where I'm from and telling me how I look familiar. I entertain her a little and answer her questions, but I'm on a date and am a cynic and believe that this was just some girl who wanted free drinks. I tell her goodbye and go find my date. Fast forward about 10 months, and my girlfriend, not the same girl from my date, breaks up with me and a friend of mine starts pestering me to come to meet him at a bar so he can introduce me to his new lady. I show up, meet this girl, have a couple vodka tonics and go to leave. It turns out it's an open mic and my buddy starts telling me I need to go up and jam. I keep saying no, but after about 2 minutes of pestering I say okay, but just one song. I play the song, get off stage, go to say goodbye, and just then my buddy's girlfriend tells me that one of her friends just showed up and there is some guy who keeps hanging around her and won't leave her alone, so I need to pretend to be her boyfriend. Turns out this girl was the girl who came up to me in the bar months previously. We end up talking, then dating and ultimately got married. I am typing this from the hospital where 24 hours ago, my wife gave birth to our 3rd child. Yes, a little karma whoring. TLDR. I met the girl twice in 2 different points in my life. I was coerced into playing her boyfriend for a night to keep another guy away. She eventually became my real wife. We also just had our 3rd child 24 hours ago. Well, she did, not me. I am typing this from the hospital where 24 hours ago. I'll be honest, my heart skipped a beat when I read that. I thought something awful happened to her. Grats on the baby. I was at a friend's house and we were just about to head out the door, but he couldn't find his keys. As he was looking, we heard several loud bangs and then the fire alarm started going off. He finally found his keys and poked his head out the door. He told me to walk quickly to the stairs and not look back. Turns out a guy was shot in the hallway about 5 feet from his door. TLDR. Friend couldn't find keys. Saved us from getting shot. If your friend hadn't misplaced his keys, your presence may have deterred the shooter. You could have saved the man's life. That man would then go on to cure cancer, AIDS, and herpes. He would also solve the US debt crisis and direct the new Star Wars movies. Oh, what could have been? Was having a smoke while waiting for the bus to take me to high school. My friends pulled up and asked if I needed a ride. I wanted to finish my smoke and was chatting with the hot girl across the street, so I passed. Less than 50 feet from my stop, he skidded on black ice and smashed into a tree. I probably wouldn't have time to put a seatbelt on. Smoking might have saved my life. One of my dad's friends worked at the World Trade Center. He survived both the 93 bombing and 9/11 because he was outside having a cigarette. After a day of skiing in New Zealand, my parents and I were heading back down the mountain and decided to stop for a guy that was trying to get a ride down the mountain. He turned out to be a local, and when visibility reached almost zero, he calmly, then not so calmly, told my dad to turn, just in time to keep us on the road. If we hadn't stopped for 3 seconds to pick him up, we would have gone off a 100m plus drop. That is real karma. Happy for all of you. My mom was sick, so my dad had to drive me to school, which made him late to work on the 11th of September 2001. He worked towards the top of one of the twin towers. He was on the hutch when it happened because he was late. Don't bother going to Urban Dictionary, dictionary.com, or Google to look up hutch. You won't find the definition he's using here. Googling on the hutch in quotes gives you the context of people crossing the Hutchinson River Parkway, which has just got to be it. Good luck understanding local lingo. When I was 17, I got invited to a party by a co-worker that was affiliated with a local gang. At the time, my town was going through a heck of a year of inter-gang violence. So much so that they set up injunctions in the hot areas of town to try and crack down on all this. Anyways, that night I ended up getting pulled over on the way to the party. The police officer kept me for roughly 15 minutes, doing his routine stuff. Meanwhile, the party that I was headed to ended up getting mobbed by a rival gang at almost that precise time. 6 people were stabbed, 1 guy died, and several people were seriously injured due to the fight. Had I not gotten pulled over, I'd have been right in the thick of it. Needless to say, best riding without a seatbelt ticket I've ever gotten. Love how you left the reason you were pulled over till the end. I was in my car looking for a parking spot, found one, turned off the ignition, then noticed outside my window a cop running right at me. He was waving and I couldn't hear him, so I finally got out of the car to talk to the cop. He had his gun prepared for what I thought was me, but then proceeded to tell me had I gotten out of my car just 1 minute before I would have been shot in the head. I had literally pulled into the middle of a shootout. True story. I was taking my dog to her Saturday morning training class, and as I pulled up to a stop sign I turned around to check on her because she was getting herself tangled in her leash. I looked back for just a couple of seconds as I was pulling up to the 4-way stop with no one in sight. When I turned back around I see a Dodge Ram diesel truck run the stop sign going pretty fast. If I didn't look back to check on my dog I probably would have been demolished by that stupid truck. It was a scary feeling. Survivor of a plane hijacking here. 12 years ago, before 9/11, I was on a flight from London to Nairobi, Kenya. As we were flying over the Sudan desert, we hit what seemed like some really bad turbulence. The only issue was that it was sunny outside, with no sign of clouds or rain. The turbulence kept up for 5-10 minutes, and all of the passengers were starting to get a little worried. Suddenly, there was a calm. Then our plane dives. I'm talking a Boeing 747 heading straight for the ground. We all knew it was the end. I watched as drops of water from the cup in front of me lifted into the air and attached to the ceiling, and watched as my gas mask fell in front of me. Right before I knew there would be impact, the plane miraculously came out of the nosedive. Several long minutes later, the pilot came on over the loudspeaker, announcing that everything was under control and that we would be continuing on to our destination. As we learned when we landed, apparently a mentally unstable man had stormed the unlocked cockpit and had attempted to crash the plane, under the belief that we were all out to get him. Thankfully, the co-pilot used to be in the Air Force and had training in pulling planes out of nosedives. As we watched our story unfold on CNN, we learned that we had been 3 seconds from exploding in midair from the sudden change in atmospheric pressure. So yeah, 3 seconds from death. I used to rollerblade to work from my old house to work. One day I started down the street, realized I forgot to put on deodorant and skated back into the house speedy as I could, and then went on my way. 4 minutes later I got hit by an SUV because the driver never looked right at the crosswalk. Shoulder gone with the stinky pits. One time when I was a kid, sometime in the mid to late 90s, my dad and I stopped at an ATM on the way home from my grandpa's. And while we were walking back to my dad's car, someone careened off the road and straight into the ATM where we were standing. I've been trying to find an article, but I can't find it anywhere. A woman was stopped at a red light, looking down into her purse. The light turned green, but she didn't notice. The guy behind her laid on the horn in frustration. She looked up into the rear view mirror and gave him the middle finger. He followed her home. This was okay back in the 70s. They chatted with each other in her parents' driveway for over an hour and the guy asks her out. They date for a while and eventually get married. They have 4 children, the second born being myself. I owe my life to the boldness of 2 people in a chance encounter. A slight shift in this series of events could have prevented my existence. An interesting twist, however. Way back then, while my parents were dating, my father introduces his best friend from high school to my mom's sister. They marry a week later and eventually have 5 children together. Much later, the oldest of these children, my cousin, begins dating a girl from Europe, here on an exchange program. She eventually introduces me to her friend who is here in the same exchange program. We date for a while and marry about 8 months later. We're coming up on our 11th anniversary and have a son and another baby on the way. I have truly won the cosmic lottery. I can't wait to tell this story to my kids when they grow up. Please don't make 8 seasons of it. Me and my family were on a vacation to London in 2005. On early Thursday morning, we awoke ready to get sightseeing. However, as we were about to head to the subway station, my mom decided that she needed to do laundry, so we detoured to McDonald's instead. While she went to the laundromat, sitting in McDonald's eating a breakfast sandwich, I noticed that there seemed to be an awful lot of police cars and ambulances going by. Television comes on, and lo and behold, multiple bombs have been detonated on subway lines. One of them being the exact line that we would have been on at the time, if not for a large bag of dirty laundry. When I was in high school, we were at a party out at a cabin in the country. The group of people I was with were all going to stay out there, but my girlfriend got violently sick at the end of the night, so we ended up leaving instead. That night a guy got mad because he wanted to hook up with a girl who was with her boyfriend. The guy was drunk. Well, when everyone was sleeping, this butthole grabbed logs out of the fire. The cabin had an interior fireplace in the center of the room, kinda like a ski lodge does, and threw the burning logs onto the couch and left. Everyone that was there was sleeping, and we were all drinking heavily that night. I lost 2 good friends that night and some others were burnt and disfigured for life. It was definitely the worst thing that happened in high school. What a crybaby donghead. Sorry for your loss. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.